Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Eliza Rawlings from Festo, as you can see. I want to start off by saying thank you to the speakers that have been on before the break time. That leads me nicely into what I'm going to talk about. We know that we heard from Tom Brake, about vision, having an action plan, leadership skills, all those good things. And we were just saying to Grant that I would like to know the company where you tell them what to do and they do it. If you know of one, let me know. And obviously with Peter's great talk about listening. So hopefully with the kind of next session that I'm going to talk about, we'll find out a little bit more actually, how do you listen? When you're running a listen, but actually how do you do it? And what's the consequences of actually not doing it? So I'm here to talk about leadership in a perfect storm. But before we look at the leadership bit, maybe we'll just remind ourselves what is a perfect storm. I found that photo, it's not a great definition, but I thought it's quite interesting that since we're in London, and it shows there's like a storm brewing over London. So I thought I'll use that as a starting slide. So let's have a look and see what is actually a perfect storm. In a weather context, a perfect storm is a particularly violent storm arising from a rare combination of adverse meteorological factors. But of course, we know that this phrase, perfect storm, is also often used to describe scenarios as a metaphor. So in that context, what does it mean? It means a critical or disastrous situation created by a powerful concurrence of factors. There are lots of things coming together. But it says critical or disastrous. It's not necessarily a disaster. It could be just critical factors. So it doesn't all have to be bad. So I thought, let's have a quick look at the powerful concurring factors that's happening around us in our world, especially taking the context of industrial automation, running factories, etc. So from my point of view, I feel that one of the things, and often hear from our customers, the things that is really driving a lot of challenges, as well as excitement in our world, is the digital transformation. The pace of change in technology is really, really going very rapidly. And I found these little graphics, and sorry if you can't quite see at the back, that describe really quite nicely all the things that's going on from a digital transformation perspective. And actually this morning, quite interestingly, one of the circles here talks about augmented reality. That as a technology was actually on one of the BBC programs this morning about how using augmented reality, we can help with partially sighted people to see very well for the first time ever. So these are opportunities that's really happening because of the digital transformation. But the big topic here, of course, is the Internet of Things. How that drives automation, robotics, 3D printing, all of those good things, leading on to great opportunities as Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 is the topic that many of our customers are talking to us about at Festo. What is it about? What are the opportunities? All the good things that happens because of the digital transformation that can bring opportunities, but can also bring uncertainties and fear for some people who may be concerned about changes. If you look at the bottom 4 bubbles, don't worry if you can't see it quite clearly, it's about cloud and mobility and all the big data, good stuff like that. In fact, those factors are so powerful that our global technology analyst firm, Gartner, actually made a logo especially to describe those 4 key driving factors about digital transformation. Gartner described these 4 elements as a nexus of converging forces, helping towards this perfect storm. They are social, media, cloud, and information. They're building upon and transforming user behavior and how we run our business, whilst creating new business opportunities. So lots of things happening, creating great opportunities. At the same time, we talked about skill shortage. So as a business manager, you may be thinking about how do I invest better in our people, how to listen to them, keep them all aligned, maybe run some apprenticeship schemes to fill the skill gaps. Just as you think you are on top of it all, keeping pace with all these things going on, bang, things that happen that's absolutely beyond our control. We know earlier on, Tom talked extensively about Brexit. What that really means, US election, it's caused a lot of uncertainties. So this picture is there to create this powerful concurring of factors. And actually, how do we deal with that as businesses? So around the Brexit time, Mervyn King coined the phrase radical uncertainty, because that's what's happening. It's no point in listening to whatever forecast or what the pundits are saying, because they've got it wrong. So does anyone really know what's happening? So Mervyn King said that the radical uncertainty phrase, it describes a kind of uncertainty that statistical analysis can't deal with. It is better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. Being roughly right requires a simple rules of thumb and an open mind, rather than any misleading, precise mathematical solutions. I think we know that very well in hindsight. So as a leader of a business, faced with these situations, I think, well, as a business, in order to respond quickly to changes that may well be beyond our control and happening quite quickly, we somehow need some agility in the business. And we'll come back later to have a look at what does that really mean. People say, oh, you need to be more agile as a business. But on a practical level, what does that actually mean? And then as I was just thinking about how best to lead in this perfect storm and radical uncertainty scenario, leading a business with people that are dependent on us. Just as I was thinking about this, how best to lead, the request from the PPMA came in to ask, perhaps I could come in and maybe talk about, the topic is leadership, maybe I can share some thoughts from a woman's perspective. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Firstly, if I were to speak, it will be from a woman's perspective. Secondly, it implies maybe there is more than one perspective. So this got me thinking now. And I remember throughout my decades of working as a manager in industry, I have often been asked a rather strange question. They say, oh, you're a woman manager. What do you think? Do you think men or women make better leaders? And that's a really, really unfair question, because whatever you say, you're going to upset at least 50% of the population. So it's no win, and I always refuse to answer this because I don't really like the question. But people ask me this, and I think, well, what are they actually trying to find out? What is behind this question? And I think the real question is, are masculine or feminine traits more effective in leading? And taking that into context, in the current radical uncertainty, about to face a period of time that we've never been before with the level of uncertainty, what do I need to think about as a leader of a business? So I started looking at what is the definition of masculine and feminine traits anyway? And the internet is full of rubbish on this topic, so don't worry, don't bother about Googling. I've done the work there. But what I did find quite interesting was from a library of Buddhism materials. And earlier on, Peter showed a picture about Laozi's words, and he used a yin and yang sign as the backdrop. So at least the Buddhist thinking goes back to at least the 6th century, I think you said. So I thought, oh, maybe they know something about it. Let's see what they've got to say. So I'm just going to show you some words. Some are in green, some are in purple. I avoided using the stereotyping, the blue and the pink. So I thought I'll use some neutral colors. So what are feminine traits? According to this article on the Buddhist website, is more about the gentle approach, being compassionate, empathetic, more communicative, responsive, and the relational aspects. Whereas the masculine traits is about being strong, courageous, maybe assertive, competitive, and independent. And a summary of feminine traits are that they are primarily the more nurturing, they're more nurturing and interpersonally orientated. Such traits engender greater social closeness with others. The masculine traits are primarily more independent and assertive. These traits drive high self-esteem, high self-belief, and success in many situations. Neither are bad or good, right or wrong. They're just what they are, masculine and feminine traits. And if anybody has seen the last Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi with Lewis Hamilton, he was exhibiting textbook masculine traits. Win at all costs, sod the teammate, I'm going to win. So from that point of view, that was quite a good exhibit of this, I thought. So what was this about, feminine, masculine traits? The other thing that this article on the Buddhist website said, both men and women have the ability to express both sets of traits. Okay, it's not exclusive to one sex or the other. Both men and women can do this. Of course, we know that. And people should use these traits as the situation requires. Seems common sense. But sometimes when we are facing unknown situations, when to use which traits? So I want to just have a quick look at that so that we can bring it back to the context of managing or leading in a perfect storm situation. So when to use which traits? Having done a bit of Buddhism, I would now like to go to perhaps a little bit more scientific look at this. I would like to borrow some research from a 1920s social psychologist called Kurt Levine. And I was very pleased that Peter didn't put him up as rubbish, and nor have I ever seen a book about him in Heathrow. So hopefully that's a good starting point. So Kurt Levine, who is he? For those who don't know of him, he was born in the 1890s into a Jewish family in Poland. He grew up in Germany and was educated in Germany. During the Second World War, him and his family, they emigrated to the USA for obvious reasons. His field of research is social psychology. He was a professor in Berlin University and continued to work in the US in this field after he emigrated. But he's most well known for group dynamics, how people behave in group situations. And I just want to borrow from him, by far my favorite piece of research from him, is the force field analysis. Okay, so his research is looking at having a framework to look at how factors and forces that influence a situation, mainly social situations. And he talks about their helping forces, things that drive towards a goal, and their resisting or restraining or hindering forces that prevent the goal from happening. So if you think about in a rapid changing world, when we try to implement change, you're always coming across people that are for it and against it. So how do we deal with those situations, especially changes are happening very rapidly? So let's look at the force field analysis in the change management scenario. And the reason why I like this particular theory is because being an engineer by background, I quite like things I can relate to from a scientific perspective. So I thought maybe being a kind of machinery audience, perhaps some people with science background would appreciate this as well. But the first thing to remember, force is a vector. And if you're as old as me, and my friend here, Mike, knows how old I am from the bus driver question. If you're as old as me, you would have done this in your O-level maths or your physics. Force is a vector. It has direction and a magnitude. Okay, so bear that in mind while we look at some of the diagrams here. This is, first of all, a very simple diagram. So Kurt Levine asserts that in all organizations, there exists an equilibrium. Whatever you're trying to do, because although there are disagreements that may happen in your workplace, you're not having arguments or punch-ups in the car parks all the time. So people do work together in some kind of equilibrium. At any one time, there are forces that are driving towards a goal, and maybe forces that are resisting towards a goal. And often we come across, especially in the current times with a lot of uncertainty, there are a lot of people that are fearing of the change. Okay. So this equilibrium exists in all organizations. But it is only quasi-stationary. It's only stationary for a period of time until some other factors changes, where the force field come together that changes the equilibrium. So this is really just a concept of what he's talking about. Now we're going to take this equilibrium theory a bit further to actually what happens in your organization when you try to implement a change, and how do we deal with that? Now the next picture is really an extract from his 1920s research paper. So it's not a pretty PowerPoint slide, but I believe describe the situation and for me anyway, thought-provoking as to what we need to do in terms of leadership. So we're about to look at quite an old-fashioned diagram that shows us the quasi-stationary equilibria before and after changing levels of production. So he's using this in a case of a factory trying to drive up production rate, showing two possible states of tension at the new level of production, okay? Those of you who have tried to maybe increase production rate, inevitably you'll come across some people that may or may not want to go with you on your vision. So this first picture, as I say, is quite an old-fashioned picture. The line here in the middle, or just below the middle, shows the current state of the equilibrium, with some people driving force. Often maybe it's the management trying to drive up the production, and then the restraining force trying to maintain it at the current level. Okay, so this is just the first diagram. The second diagram shows that we are able to achieve the change in production level. So this is showing after changing the production level through strengthening the forces that drive towards that goal. So meaning those who are really for the change, let's just really pump them up and give them more energy to really drive towards that change, which is not an unnatural thing to do. But what you actually do in that situation is you have the bigger arrows, the magnitude of force is great in the driving, but to maintain that equilibrium, you actually have the resisting force that often is even greater. You may come across in real life scenario, you really try to push through a change. The harder you push, the stronger is the resistance that come back in maybe resisting or criticizing what you're trying to do. So that's just reality and life. But Levine asserts that you could actually, the other scenarios, to achieve that improvement in production by reducing the forces, the opposing forces, to drive towards that lowering of production. So just this very simple diagram to say you can achieve that by driving really hard, but you're going to come across more resistance, or try and reduce the resistance as a way of shifting it. And really, we are looking at the tension that is in the system. A lot of energy in this scenario is used in trying to push against that resistance. So back to what skills, feminine, masculine traits to use. I believe in setting that direction, that vision, and understanding what needs to be done. And you do have to be assertive in painting that picture and direction as a leader. That probably the purple skills would be appropriate. But in terms of reducing the tension that's in the system, it's about engaging the people. And this is really where the more compassionate listening skills, the more feminine traits needs to come in. Because otherwise you're continuously not resolving the tension that may be resisting that change. So talking about leading in a perfect storm, much earlier I was thinking about when we talk about the radical uncertainty, I feel that certainly in my organization, we need to have a great level of agility. And you can only be agile, I believe, if you achieve this particular state. You have a workforce that actually is willing and happy to change without putting up a lot of resistance. And change will need to happen quite quickly, because there are things, be it Brexit or not, exchange rate or not, we're going to have to respond very quickly to the fast-changing world around us. So as I got to this point, I thought, right, okay, we know we need to listen. A lot of the feminine traits are to do with listening. But actually, how do we listen? I don't know if you ever tried to get a group of your workers in a room and say, right, come on, sit down, tell me your problems. And a lot of them won't say anything because they don't want to be seen, first of all, to be negative. And secondly, they may not want to say it in front of other people. So there's that, how do we listen is quite a complex one to resolve. But to achieve this agility, you have to get the issues on the table. So what I want to actually share with you is something that we have done at Festo in recent times to try and address this, to try and really make sure that we really listen to our people. And hopefully, I'm just sharing with you some practical things that we have done in this listening practice. So before I talk about the pulse survey, usually when you want to find out about how your employees are feeling, you may well do an employee satisfaction survey and getting to see how are they doing, what are the issues, how do you feel about your manager, and all those good things. And we have been doing that for years at Festo. Sometimes, annual survey, biannual surveys, and they've gone really well and give us up good feedback. But in such a fast-changing world, surveying your people once a year, you're going to miss a lot of things and maybe leave a lot of issues and concerns and anxieties unanswered for a very long time, which will be the resisting force that prevents you to drive the business forward. So what we've done in the last few months, and we've implemented something called a pulse survey. Literally, you think about just occasionally checking the pulse. How's it doing? How fast or slow is it beating? So this pulse survey, what does that mean? What practically do we do? We now survey our employees once a fortnight, but we only take that 1 minute of their time with 5 questions. Okay. You might think, oh God, that seems a lot of surveys. Is it? How are you going to sustain that momentum of people answering your questions once a fortnight? What I use is actually a piece of software called Office Vibe. Those of you who are into software design will understand that this is the word gamification. The design is based on the concept, almost like with gaming kind of software in mind. Really easy, really intuitive, really quick to do. That's why you can answer a survey in less than 1 minute. Now, Office Vibe is a cloud-based piece of software. I've just come from a cloud computing company. I didn't say at the beginning. I used to work for Festo as head of sales. Then I went away for 6 years and worked in the cloud computing industry. And then now I've come back to take over as managing director. And Office 5 was something that I used when I was in the cloud industry that I come across. And I thought, this is brilliant. Really dynamic, easy to use piece of software, whilst our workforce is going through major change because of the environment. I really need to know what they're thinking. So what is special about Office Vibe? I'm going to just show you some screenshots of actually how do we do the pulse survey and the power of it. And I just refer to something that Grant said about in your company or in many of your businesses. You may not have an HR department just because of your size, or you may only have a part-time HR administrator. So something like this, as you will see, is very easy to use. You don't need an HR team to run it, but it gives you the pulse check on a regular basis. So just show you a bit, and I'm not on the payroll of Office 5, by the way. I'm not even on commission, but I'm just really excited by it, and I think it brings a great dimension to managing your business in difficult times. So Office 5. So once a fortnight, you can do it once a week, but once a fortnight, we send a survey to our employees. As you can see, very easy to use interface. How do you feel today at the office? They can answer it from 1 to 10. And whatever they answer, then a second pop-up will come up and say, what would make you happier at work? Okay. This is an optional question. This is where potentially things that they don't normally want to say, this is where they can actually tell you about it. Because it's totally anonymous. But they can also choose to put their name down as well. But for those, and once you start opening that dialogue, sometimes people want to say something, but they don't really want you to know who they are yet. They just want you to know someone is feeling like that in the business. So I find that particularly useful to have a forum. It's about creating an environment where people can feel safe in communicating their deepest concerns that could be preventing them from being agile in the business. So they do that, and in total, there are some 300-odd questions, all based on assessing employee engagement. They only sample fed out 5 per survey. So over a period of time, they would have answered all the questions to give you a full profile of how they're feeling. From a management perspective, this is where if you don't have an HR department, it doesn't matter, because being a cloud-based system on the portal, you can get immediately live information of the pulse of your business, how people are feeling. And it actually goes much deeper into further in-depth analysis, if you want, as to the areas that you can look at, like personal growth, recognition, relationship with managers. Wellness, in this example, is particularly down, which is looking at stress in the workplace. That even the eating habits, are they staying healthy? To be agile, you've got to be fit. So we also even look at those factors. So this is something that we have rolled out. and it's going on at the moment. We've got some Festo colleagues here. If you want to see how they're doing, please do ask, for example, Andrew or Gary at lunchtime. And it's something that I would really urge you to think about, whether you use Office 5 or not, but some kind of pulse survey on a regular basis, just to create a platform and an environment for your employees to communicate with you. Because through this period of radical uncertainties, there are going to be fears and anxieties that come out that probably has never manifested itself in the past in your organization. But it comes with a health warning. If you do this because you think, oh, it sounds really good, and actually, we should do it, because people aren't really telling us about the problems. The issue here with this health warning is if you do it, you have to follow through. There's nothing worse than asking people for their views and opinions and then ignoring them. I have filled in a questionnaire for EasyJet 3 years ago with a really bad experience I had, and they say, would you like us to call you? I said yes, and I'm still waiting for that call. So please be careful. You need to make sure that you have the time and you and your managers in your business know actually how to deal with the feedback that comes in. Because all kinds of things are going to come in. And I think someone said, you were saying that British engineers, we are great, we love solving problems. So we find that in our business, for example, some of our managers have come through the engineering technical background. You give them a problem, they're brilliant at solving it straight away. But sometimes the kind of problems that people share anonymously are not problems to do with how to design the machine or I need a new printer. There can be very deep-rooted issues about their own anxieties. And you can't just come up with a problem. Because the key thing is applying the green skills we said earlier, the empathy, the compassion, to really understand and give them a platform to air their concerns. They may not even be looking for a solution, but they just really need you to know and acknowledge that these concerns exist in the business. So please do think it through. If you do, I would highly recommend you do something like this, but enter it with a view of seeing it through to the end or continually. Otherwise, you're going to upset them even more by asking them and then not being able to do something about it. And the other health warning is they will say things that you don't want to hear. They will tell you things, no matter how hard you've been trying, not sleeping at night, trying to write a new initiative, and they might be just rubbishing it because it's anonymous. And what we say to our managers is, whatever they say, we mustn't be defensive. Take it on the chin. Because if that's how they feel, we probably haven't done our job enough to really ensure they understand what it's about. So there's a bit of health warning there, but I would highly recommend it as a practice. Engaging employees is great, but it's only one of the few things that you need to think about in terms of managing your business in a perfect storm. So to help you, I just want to quickly share with you what we did as a management team. As we were entering into the Brexit period, when things were looking uncertain, I sat down with our management team, and we actually resurrected an old white paper that we used in 2009 when we were heading into a recession to look at what are the things that we need to do to manage ourselves as a business to be sure that we come out stronger than before. This white paper from Festo actually has a 7-pointer essential checklist. Securing your intellectual capital is the first one. Engaging the people, which we've just talked about extensively, is the second one. And then other key business practice that we need to look at. Looking at business drivers, building your customer orientation, focusing on your customer's needs. And we are finding that right now the customer needs us more than ever to help them to see through the next period of uncertainty. Thinking lean, reviewing spend. A lot of these I'm sure you're doing already. But I thought when I looked at this, I thought actually this is really useful as a checklist. So what I've done is that on our checklist, it also comes with a little action plan as well to help. And I sat down with the management team to actually go through this smart action plan for each point. And to help you, if you so wish to have a copy, an easy to remember website link that you can go to after the talk today is actually available now. festo-didactic.co.uk/perfect storm. just to remind you of this session. So feel free to download, or if you want, let us know your name or your email address. I'm more than happy to email you a copy. So something that I would encourage you to have a look. As I'm just finishing now, I just want to share a final point. We've looked at how to manage in radical uncertainties, the kind of traits that we might need to apply. If you have managers that don't have those traits naturally, they're not natural listeners, you have to train them up to have the skills to do it. Skills is about how to apply, learn things and apply. So maybe have a look at what managers are able to engage easily and who's not able to do that. So my final thought that I want to leave with you is actually a funny word that on the front of this white paper. You may not be able to see it. It's a few words jumbled up. And I just want to test the audience to see, not in a way like earlier. You don't have to shout out your answer. What do you see? Do you see, for those who can't see it, you can read it as opportunity is nowhere, or opportunity is now here. And what do we want our employees to feel? We want our employees to have the optimism, to think of the digital transformation, maybe the drop in fall in exchange rate as opportunities. So how do we, as leaders, ensure they have that positive vision? So to end this talk, I want to share a picture with you. We've listened to some Buddhism, we've done some maths, O-level maths, and I want to end on a particular famous painting, borrow some lessons from the arts. I'm sure many of you will recognize this painting as Monet's Lily Pond. And recently I came across this painting again in a book called Art as Therapy. It is not a self-help book, okay? And when I bought this, I wasn't looking for therapy. It's written by a modern philosopher, Alain de Botton, or Button in English. A great guy. Got some really good videos of him giving speeches on the internet. Please do look it up if you're bored of Christmas TV and you can't bear to watch any more films, then have a look at that. So what he says in this book is that many people, general public, lots of us, like these really beautiful paintings. But there are art critics and snobs that say we shouldn't. Yeah? We shouldn't be liking these popular, pretty paintings. And why? So he's got a chapter in here under the heading of hope, where he refers to this painting. I just want to read you a couple of paragraphs to end this talk. So he first of all talks about why the critics think we shouldn't like these pretty paintings. He said the worries about prettiness are twofold. Firstly, pretty pictures are alleged to feed sentimentality. Sentimentality is a symptom of insufficient engagement with complexity, by which we really mean problems. So the critics are saying, if you like this, then maybe because you're a bit simple, is what they're saying. Secondly, there is the related fear that prettiness will numb us and leave us insufficiently critical and alert to the injustices around us. The worry is that we may feel pleased and cheerful too readily, that we will take on overly optimistic view of life and the world. In short, that we will be unjustifiably hopeful by wanting to admire beautiful things. So Alain de Botton, he says that is actually not true. So this is what he says. However, these worries are generally misplaced, far from taking too rosy and sentimental a view. Most of the time we suffer from excessive gloom. We are only too aware of the problems and injustices of the world. It's just that we feel debilitatingly small and weak in the face of them. Cheerfulness is an achievement, and hope is something to celebrate. If optimism is important, it is because many outcomes are determined by how much of it we bring to the task. It is an important ingredient of success. This flies in the face of the elite view that talent is the primary requirement of a good life. But in many cases, the difference between success and failure is determined by nothing more than our sense of what is possible and the energy we can muster to convince others of our due. We might be doomed not by a lack of skill, but by an absence of hope. Today's problems are rarely created by people taking too sunny a view of things. It is because the troubles of the world are so continually brought to our attention that we need tools that can preserve our hopeful dispositions. So as we are about to end a pretty horrendous year and start a new year in 2017, I want to leave you with this image and this beautiful painting as collectively our tool to help us preserve our hopeful dispositions. Thank you.